our friend Tom Murphy, Whole Hog Sports.
Top knot on his head.
Arkansas Democrat-Gazette might have. Tom, do you have tickets for our listeners?
Yeah.
Do you have
Everybody thinks if you're in the media, they just give us free tickets.
Morning, Tom.
Good morning, guys. No, I haven't tried to get a ticket since, oh my gosh, I think it was an LSU game about 10 years ago. That's just not my scene, man, trying to get a bunch of tickets because I just don't like to do that.
I hear you, man. I hear you. All right, so let's talk about the injury report heading into this game. You got a couple defensive backs out. Jalen Braxton, who's been out for a while. Anthony Switzer recently listed on the report. Selman Bridges, a young freshman we hadn't really seen this year. But the good news is Jaquindon Jackson, Taylon Green listed as probable. Tom, what did you take away from Arkansas's injury report heading into this game on Saturday?
Well, there was a couple of items that we were pretty well aware of that went right, like Sam Pittman had talked about, Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson. Okay, that's cool. And then he did mention, I think it was on radio, he mentioned on his SEC teleconference appearance that Jalen Braxton was still out. So if he's going to get in the four before, to maintain redshirt status, he would have to be Louisiana Tech, and then Missouri. But there were some surprises. I mean, the freshman DB Selman Bridges, who looked fine to me. I remember seeing him on the sideline late in the Ole Miss game, maybe, or at least midway through. He's out. So there's some things that happened in practice. Anton Junkaj, I think was listed as out or doubtful, and then Anthony Switzer. I mean, these are all that either happened like late or at some point in the Ole Miss game or during the practices. So there was a few that and Sam Pittman had kind of briefly mentioned Junkaj is beat up, but I mean, I think he was listed as out. So there was a few that were a little surprising, actually.
When you look at what Arkansas has offensively, if they get Jaquindon Jackson back, and you look at who Texas has maybe played this year, Tom, how do you think Arkansas's offense can have success against one of the better defenses in football?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, Texas hasn't played anybody." I mean, the Vanderbilt game on the road to me is they've been a tough out for people this year, and the 27-24. I mean, I think Vanderbilt scored kind of late, but anyway, to me, that's a little bit of an indicator. And Mississippi State moved the ball on them a little bit in Austin too, so it's not going to be impossible for Arkansas to move the ball and get points. And honestly, I wrote a story for today about their offensive numbers. They've actually, I mean, they're top 10 in total offense. They've passed the ball pretty well, and their the rushing numbers have been okay. I mean, they're just below 300 yards passing and just below 200 yards rushing, which is a fine season. If they could cut down on their turnovers, they would be like a really top tier offense. So, having said that, Texas has great personnel on defense. They're really big. They're powerful. Not a lot of stunting and all that. They just come at you on defense. And in their secondary, they got 14 interceptions. So, they're going to try to pressure Taylon Green, get him moving around, test his knee, and then see if they can get him to throw into some dangerous situations. And that's their formula. Arkansas has got to stay on schedule, with the chains. They've got to make Texas kind of respond to what they're doing. And I don't doubt that with 2 weeks that Bobby Petrino is going to have a good game plan that's going to give Texas some pause and is going to make them have to adapt to what they're doing. And if they can do that and not turn the ball over, then you start looking at the keys to pulling off an upset here.
How do you play better at home, Tom? That's one question, and I don't know that it gets answered this week, but one of the concerns is you played better on the road than you have in your own stadium. You got to win one of these last two. You would think to get bowl eligible, going to Missouri, counting on a win there with your back to the wall is not ideal. So you got La Tech. Right. How do you start playing better at home this week against Texas?
That's a great question. It's just kind of like an esoteric idea that okay, hey, Auburn,
it's a given you should play well at home, but this team hasn't.
Exactly, and it dates back to, even 22 losing to Liberty and stuff. So I don't know other than, try to recreate the feeling that you have. I mean, you think about Auburn. They got on top of Auburn pretty good and created all those turnovers. Mississippi State, they got the opening kick, I believe, and just went right down and scored and just stayed on top of them. The LSU game, I think Arkansas won the toss. No, I think LSU won the toss and took the ball. And I was thinking, if I'm Sam Pittman, I take the ball here and see if I can't score and get ahead. Or maybe that's what they did, but they didn't move it. Anyway, I liked it that they jumped out on Mississippi State on the road and just kind of put them on the bad foot. And I just think getting a little bit of a lead, getting the fans involved, all of that plays into it. So even in the Tennessee game, they won the game, but they didn't push through some of the drives and get 7 instead of 3 and stuff like that. So tackling the ball in space is going to be really, really big. Maintaining or winning in special teams also big, and then just the turnovers. Steve Sarkisian said it this week. Turnover margin is the biggest indicator in whether you win or lose a game, and it is played like the gold standard for Arkansas this year.
Yeah.
Tom, stepping outside of what's happening in Fayetteville, it doesn't sound like Nico Ilamalieva, or however you say his name, is going to play against the Bulldogs in Athens. Who do you like in that game, Georgia and Tennessee?
Well, the way Ole Miss played Arkansas, I thought, man, them going home against Georgia, I really favored Ole Miss to win the game. Maybe not as dominantly as they did, but I think Georgia's offense is just kind of off. Just not its normal self this year. Their defense is okay, but it's just weird to see in recent years how much Georgia has dominated, and then this year they seem to have some flaws. But I think with Nico out, that it favors Georgia. They're at home. They want to respond. They want to get back into the playoff picture because they're the first team out right now. And so I would think Georgia would have a better chance at winning.
How many SEC teams do you think, as we sit here on November the 14th, get in the college football playoff?
Well, I think 4 probably is like – I think that's maybe like the minimum. So right now Georgia being one team out would be the 5th. But if Georgia beats Tennessee, I don't think that knocks Tennessee out necessarily, depending on like the margin, like how badly Georgia got beat last week took them from 2 to 12. So I don't know if, depending on the margin of Tennessee. But who does that put on the edges? Ole Miss obviously cannot afford another loss, and if you're Alabama, you don't want to lose again either. So there's a chance they get 5, but I think it's more likely to end up being 4. And then I'll tell you what, y'all, if I can go on a small spiel here, doing my AP ballot this week was so strange because you're comparing a lot of 2-loss SEC teams with 1-loss Big Ten teams and other type teams. And so that's why, I just think the depth of the strength of the depth of the SEC is better. And that's why Indiana has gotten to this point. As much as I love their success story, they're 10-0. But look at who they've played. Michigan's down and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I just feel like the SEC not only deserves to get 4, but they really should get 4 and maybe even 5.
Yeah, and how do you equate the fact that Georgia beats Texas, but Texas is 9 spots ahead according to the committee? It looks to me like the committee is taking a lot of cues, not in every case, but in some cases from the polls. I just don't know how serious the committee's focus is on really getting the best 12 teams in some kind of legitimate order at this point. I think they're still waiting on a few matchups on the field, like Indiana and Ohio State, like a few in the SEC and some that we'll see this weekend, games involving Georgia, games involving Ole Miss, games involving Texas A&M at the end of the year to really decide some of these things. And I think that last poll is going to look a lot different than what we've seen the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, maybe so. And then you got teams like SMU right on the edge that have 1 loss. And then, BYU's still unbeaten. They've got a few tough games left as well and really skeeched out that one against Utah last week. So a lot still to be determined, but I just feel like Big Ten and SEC might be sitting there at 4 each, and that only leaves 4 other spots.
What'd you think of the basketball team last night? Big Z comes through with some big second half 3-point baskets, got the team going, forced a lot of turnovers in the game with Troy, and Arkansas wins going away after trailing at the half.
Yeah, they did, and John Calipari points out, why do I schedule these teams like Lipscomb and Troy? He called them like tough. they challenge you. I know Arkansas fans would have much rather have pulled away in the first half than the second, but they're still learning each other. They were jacking those threes up early in the game, missing some dunks too. But hopefully Trevin Brazil's okay, with his ankle, and they can kind of continue. He pointed out yesterday, it was interesting, they haven't really been able to scrimmage very much. So they're gonna have to put in a zone defense now, and that'll help them in offensively going up against zones as well. So it's just going to be a really fun and interesting dynamic watching this team grow. I mean, Boogie Fland is such a natural basketball player and all, and I like what he brings, but a lot of other pieces that are going to have to continue to evolve as the season goes along, and hopefully they can continue that type three-point shooting as opposed to the two exhibitions in the first two games.
Also got two big commits this week from Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff, and not just commits, but signees as well. So they've signed with this basketball team yesterday. Tom, we'll leave it there, man. See you on Saturday, and we'll chat again next week.
All right, sounds good. See you.
That's Tom Murphy, Whole Hog Sports, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here.